talking quietly, hopefully, because it's late. I'm not supposed to be up talking right now because of my roommates, but it took me a minute to upload that, and I just feel the need to talk about these things right now. Okay, so I'm just going to pick up where I left off. So we go to Baltimore, Dundalk to be specific, which like I said is like 15-20 minutes outside of Baltimore. His parents live in a townhome there, and he lived there with his younger brother. At the time he was 26, I was 24. Kind of right from the start, things are weird, but I'm also just some random girl that moved into this dude's parents' house, right? So like, there's only so much you can expect in that way, essentially. His family was very nice and very kind about that. It probably already seemed weird to them. But like at this point in my life, I had only just began to really consider the things that had happened in my past growing up. And I didn't really know what to think about those things. My family had always been everything to me. I'd always been extremely close to them. To the point of like always kind of being isolated. I had friends, but generally the friends that I was allowed to have were the friends I was allowed to have. They weren't people that I actually got along with or that actually even liked me. I was constantly made fun of, constantly isolated regardless, bullied a lot. I was overweight. I didn't really care about myself. And those things were pretty reflected in the way that I like carried myself. And just in my appearance in general. I didn't get positive attention from men, boys, at all, or girls. I got made fun of a lot. And, I mean, people thought I was fun. They thought that I was funny. I tried mostly to hang out with, like, my brothers and their friends. I always felt cooler doing that. But then by the time that I got married, I didn't really have my own friends necessarily that I could trust. The best friend that I had at the time, we had a rough relationship, and then when I got married, he was he ended up killing himself or mysteriously dying. He was 23 years old, and apparently he wasn't on drugs. He just slipped and fell and hit his head, is what I was told the official story was. However, I talked to him that day, and he told me that he was on Molly. So it was weird that nothing came up in his system for drug use. I also know that he smoked pot, so I don't really know what was going on there. I'm pretty sure he'd been drinking the night before even. I don't know how long it takes for that stuff to come out of your system, but his autopsy came back clean, supposedly. I didn't go to his funeral, because shit was just kind of fucked up at that time. And, it was after he had died, and then, like, when I was going through my separation and stuff, especially with, even before then, I started to kind of come into this understanding of there just being something wrong with my family dynamic, and I had always recognized my mental health being rather poor, but I had never necessarily equated it to my family or things that I experienced growing up. Most of that stuff was incredibly suppressed. I honestly just didn't even remember a lot of it at the time. And then at 24, it kind of just all started flooding in. I literally, woke up one day and realized that I had been abused, and suddenly, it was like floodgates opening up. And that was really hard to process. And that was largely in part why I became so depressed. Also, I was separating from my husband, who I thought we were going to be together for our entire lives. I was prepared to stay committed to him regardless. But he was in love with somebody else and was literally so miserable with me, and I wasn't going to keep him in a situation like that. I don't think I woke my roommate up. I think he was already awake, but I'm not trying to be too loud. So yeah, all of that was leading into a depression, and like I said in the last video, like I got on coke, which really the only time up until then, truly the only time up until then that I'd ever even done coke was with my brothers. The only time that I would do it was with my brothers. My oldest brother had, he let me do it when I was 16, but only a tiny bit. And then once I was 19, like, he was already on it very consistently. My other brother was on it. All of their friends were on it. My brother's now wife, who was my best friend growing up, but she was a year younger than me, she was on it. And they were all kind of doing it together at my brother's house with her, my brother's now wife, my middle brother's wife, her brother, and another one of our friends who got on it real bad. They also used to have a friend that used to come over and do it, Josh, who ended up ODing on heroin, dying when I was 16, 17, something like that, 16 I think. But like I was over there at one point, and yeah, I remember my brother's wife's brother being like, we're all doing it, and she's an adult now, so like, you should just let her do it. My oldest brother was like, I just didn't really want her to get on it like the rest of us all are, you know, which is kind. But ultimately, the reason I was ever doing it was with them, and was just kind of because everybody else was doing it. And we would do it like bro nights, you know, we'd smoke and drink and do coke and just stay up all night. Sometimes smoke salvia. My brothers would do acid, or my oldest brother at least dropped acid a few times, but I never did. And I don't know if there was any other kind of drug use going on, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, it was mostly like partying, right, that way. And so once I started doing it without them was when it got bad. But that was also because I was going through my depression at that time, and because I was separating from my husband, and because I was living out of my car. So I kind of just started doing it and didn't stop. Like, I just was doing it consistently all the time, any chance I could get. Also because my dealer was my friend, it was easy enough for me to do it very consistently. And like I said, I did it for almost like 3 months before he pretty much stopped me. And at that point, I didn't have any money left, and I was living out of my car, and my parents basically forced me to come live back with them. Yeah. So I was, and I didn't want to, because I was aware at this point. I just started feeling all these things about my family, and I was getting mad at them, embittered, really, for all of the past that I hadn't processed, that had been suppressed. So it all kind of came up at once, right? And I found myself very embittered against them. And so getting away at first and being in Baltimore was there were so many different aspects of that were incredibly good for me. One, it was the first time I'd really been away from my family, and truly. And I actually started to feel like myself. My whole identity had always really been based on my relationships with them, and honoring them and pleasing them and making sure that they liked me. And I didn't really care about that at that time. So that was new for me. Also, being out of the Midwest was incredibly helpful. I've always felt so much better not being in the Midwest mentally. The Midwest really brings me down. It just is. So at first, despite how awkward things were, it was also freeing, truly freeing for the first time. But there were these two extremes that were happening. Like I said, like Kevin had told me like a week before he came to pick me up that he had dropped acid with this girl, and he just hadn't been the same since. And I truly was scared of him, but didn't really know what to make of those feelings. I had been scared a lot in my life and kind of always suppressed that. I never validated my feelings. So I kind of just accepted that. And I don't think he was necessarily even in the best place with his parents, but the way that his mom was very much like his dad was very absent emotionally. He was present there in the home, but just kind of absent, like on a more personal level. His dad had been an alcoholic when Kevin was growing up and was really bad on it. And once he sobered up, he kind of, I think, felt a lot of guilt for how abusive he had been as an alcoholic. And also for all the time kind of missed while he was drunk. And Kevin that whole time had kind of been keeping down the fort, but getting fucked up mentally. And so there's just these weird dynamics in the home that way where like his dad was very like almost like shy about things. He wanted to be nice, he wanted to be fun, but he was struggling even just to be himself, I think, and just felt a lot of guilt. And his mom was very sweet, good Christian woman, right, who like kind of almost, I don't want to say anything bad about her in that way, but like cognitively dissonant, right? Intentionally ignorant because of her faith. Or like, well, she had been abused when her husband was a drunk, but she remained faithful to him, and she continued to care for the family. And so once he got sober and came back around, which was like a testament of her faith, she just kind of, she was the matriarch of the family because of her faith. But at the same time, like, it wasn't even like she was a perfect Christian by any means, and she would say the same thing, but like, she just, but she did have faith, and that had carried the family as far as they had been, and, there's so many wonderful things about their family, and every family has so many different toxic dynamics, right? So I'm not trying to shit on the family. Obviously, when you're somebody that's not part of a family and you come in as a stranger and live in their household, you see things from a different perspective. And coming from where I was, and especially in the mindset that I was in at that time, just beginning to even understand my abuse, let alone to like even begin the healing truly. It was easy to see a lot of the negative things, and also like things were only progressing with Kevin in a negative way. It didn't seem that way at first. The first 4 months were kind of good. I mean, there were so many good things I received from this experience, but it was kind of like, I just saw a video the other day of, what was her name? What was her name? I always forget her name until I look at her face. Shelley Duvall. When she was working with Stanley Kubrick on The Shining, and she actually got PTSD from that experience. But, and like later on would say that had really fucked her up before she actually lost her mind. But initially, directly out of that experience, and when she was doing interviews for The Shining, talking about it, people would be like, oh yeah, Stanley's really hard to work with, right? And she was like, yeah, I mean, I wasn't, she's like, yeah, I mean, a lot of it felt like actual torture. He was pushing me to the edge in so many different ways, but at the same time, like, I really appreciate him because he pushed me to limits that I otherwise would not have ever been. And there's more, like, what do you call that? Virtuosity? Like, there's more of an extreme of her emotional capacity as an actress during that movie, because of having worked with Kubrick the way that he was, and meeting all of those demands and being essentially tortured and traumatized the way that she was. So she learned in the after effects to not just forgive him, but to actually embrace those things and to almost have, well, she said that she respected him, but it was almost like a bit of admiration even for, what he had done. At the same time, it was also, there was still this, I'm not going to give you all the power, because I was the one that went through that, and I was the one that did those things, but she was very gracious about it, and I have absolutely related to that. Seeing that was impactful for me, and I guess it's maybe even why I felt the need to bring this up now. At least part of it, because that just randomly showed up in my newsfeed, and I can definitely relate to that. There were so many different things that I'm going to discuss that were innately negative, but the thing about innate negativity is that it is the prime opportunity to be able to properly alchemize, truly alchemize things. It's one thing to, have negative experiences that you can look back on and be like, but you know what? I was actually fucking up, and I was in this place and doing this thing. And there's plenty of that to be said in this experience as well. But there's also a lot of things where it was like, it was completely unjustified. It was absolutely really crazy. The only justification was, even as Kevin had admitted, the fact that I was dumb enough to put myself in those positions. But at the same time, that's what allowed me the capacity to be able to truly get to know myself. And I was forced to, and to find my grounding and my ability to be able to heal, and to survive, So it's not to give credit to those who have done us damage, but to be thankful for the experiences that taught us to survive, right? So I'm not trying to say anything necessarily bad, anything. I want to be as honest as possible about things, where it's not just, obviously everything's coming from my bias, but I'm trying to be as honest as I can from my experience, and with my emotions about things and everything like that, and I'm not just trying to shit all over people. But I found myself, I loved his mom, and I had a good relationship with his mom the whole time I was there, but at the same time, in part because of the issues I have with my own mom, in part because of the issues I have with most mothers in general, and just the way that they make excuses for their children just to make excuses for themselves, but then because they're the mom, they act like they're in the right for that. No, I'm just making excuses for my kid because I love him. When it's no, you're making excuses for yourself and how your kid is, because it's a reflection of you, and you're narcissistic. We all are. But somebody, narcissistic, but there's a difference between being narcissistic and having narcissistic personality disorder, which can be extremely damaging to those that have intimate relationships with those people. His mom was not a narcissist. Kevin is. And, I think that it was hard for her to see him that way. I think that his dad felt a lot of guilt. I think his dad looked at it the way that most men his age look at the dynamics of a family, which would be that, the reason anything's fucked up is because he didn't do his job right? Because that's the way that a lot of boomers were taught. We're this generation nowadays tends to look at things like every individual has their own choice and capacity to make their own choices, and it's all just about encouraging people to make, to know themselves and to make the best choices that they can for themselves, and to accept those things and to not identify with it. not your fault if your child is gay. Your child was born gay because that's who they are and what they are. The worst thing you could do is try to make them feel bad for that sort of deal, right? The second worst thing you could do is talk about how bad you feel about it. No, I accept you as that, but it's probably my fault, as if it's something to be ashamed of, right? Even narcissistic personality disorder, even psychopathy, isn't something to look at so innately negatively. In my personal opinion, a mental disorder, like, there can be different things that trigger certain disorders, or different types of issues and traumas and different stuff like that, and there's different stuff that can lead into what would cause a person to actively behave certain ways. But ultimately, I just don't think that it's best to, like, look at anybody's identity as something innately negative, but rather to, you know, especially when you're close to them, to show them love and, you know, just to work through those things. I mean, again, I think it was just, his dad took it very personally because he had been an alcoholic, and his mom was incredibly deflective because she had just done everything in faith and she had tried her best, so she felt more victimized than she could take responsibility for those things, or than she was willing to take responsibility for those things, or she felt like she already had taken responsibility for those things, right? And that was like part of the victimization. There's such like a weird balance psychologically with a lot of these things. Ultimately, I mean, Kevin's a grown adult, and at 26 was making the choices that he chose to make. He's brilliant. He's an incredibly intelligent person, one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. But he's also a tad delusional. He's not mentally well. I don't know how he is now. Obviously, this was back in 2014. 2014 and 2015. So, you know, I'm speaking on then. I also was extremely mentally unwell then, so I'm not saying that people can't heal and can't change, even from disorders such as, you know, I mean, I think narcissistic personality disorder or bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, those types of things, like, I don't think that you necessarily just, I think that those things will always somehow be a part of you, but, like, I do think that you can learn how to manage them. I don't think you necessarily heal from them, but, like, at the same time, like, post-traumatic stress disorder, that's just a disorder, and I have actively healed from it in so many ways now. Not that I've perfectly healed from it. There's still plenty of triggers that I have. I have CPTSD, so, like, it's not just like it was ever going to be just one thing to heal it. But I have actually seen healing in that degree, so I don't think anything's so totally definitive. You know, that's just my personal opinion. But yeah, the household was very strange that way, because, like I said, like, his dad was like not, his dad didn't run the household, even though there was this dynamic of classic gender roles where the man is supposed to be the head of the household. But that's why Kevin had this weird, you know, he was his oldest brother was much older than him and had already lived out of the house for quite some time. So Kevin had kind of run the household, right, for during his teen years and as he aged up into a young adult. And I don't know how long his dad had been sober, but there's just a weird dynamic in the house. And it was almost like, while I was there too, I watched his dad start to, like, realize that he needed to step up a bit and try to, and Kevin kind of, like, throw in his face that he didn't have any right to, and that he was already grown, and basically, like, he already lost that battle, and, like, hold it against his mom in all these different ways. It was a hard dynamic. But, like, the first 4 months mostly revolved around, like, we started selling his things. We were making art. Every day we had a different plan to like be very active. We would go out for hikes. We were taking Scooby, his dog, out with my Maggie. We were taking them out for hikes. I had my Mags with me. She was how old was she? This was 10 years ago. So yeah, she was only like 4 or 5 or something like that. Yeah, she was like 5. And Scooby, I think, was only like 2. He's a big dog, though. Then Scrappy was his brother's dog, and all 3 of them lived at the house. And we weren't allowed to sleep in the same room, but Kevin only had his own room, and then his brother had his own room. There wasn't any other room. So I was sleeping on the couch, and me and Kevin would kind of switch off who would sleep on the couch. But then as we started selling things, and that was to save up money, but we were also like smoking pot at the time, which was spending money, and we weren't working. So we were like selling his things, and at first he was like really excited about it, but then he started getting embittered about it. And it was like, why don't you have more money? Like, why do I have to sit here and sell all my things? And I was like, I already sold all my things, and all that money was what we used to survive the 2 weeks that he was there in Wisconsin, and then what we used to get back to Baltimore, and then what we used up until we started selling his things. By the time we sold like a couple of his canoes and the stuff to go with it, and I don't think he sold his accordion, but I think he sold his record player. He had like this portable record player and some records that I think he sold. We were trying to sell art. We weren't very good at selling art. His art was beautiful, incredible. He's an incredibly talented artist. But things also just started to get weird. And like he was training me. Man, I really should like take the time to sit and actually write this down, like really sit with myself and break it down so that I have like what it looked like from month to month, and kind of how we got into this, to things getting really fucked up. Because it happened so slowly, the way that most abuse does, right? It like first started off with us like setting goals for us to achieve as we were working towards being able to go onto the road. And at the time, like, I'm talking to my grandma consistently. I also started talking again. I'd already been actually talking to my real dad's mom, who, like, we'd been somewhat estranged from a lot of our lives, not intentionally, but because she was very reclusive. So we were very close to my mom's mom and to my mom's stepmom. We were pretty close. I loved my stepdad's mom. I'd went and stayed with her a couple times, just for like a week or whatever, you know, when I was a teenager, for the fun of it, you know, just to get close to her. But I'd spent a week with my real dad's mom when I was about 8. I think I was 8 to 10, somewhere in between there. And I remember that like 2 days after I'd been there, my mom called me telling me that my bird had died, or that he had fallen from the top of his cage and potentially broken his back. He wasn't moving anymore, but he was still alive. And I'm pretty sure I left my grandma's even like early in order to go take care of my bird, and then he ended up dying. That's like a whole nother story. But I'm pretty sure my uncle also lived with my grandma, my real dad's brother, who had pretty severe schizophrenia. He had been very reclusive himself, and always, he lived with my grandma until he was about 50, I think, is when he finally moved out, they moved into a house that was like a few blocks away, and I went and visited him there a couple times with my ex-husband. But even when he was still living with my grandma, we would go and visit. I actually spent a lot of time with my real dad's mom during that whole period from like 2013 until 2015. I was talking to her pretty consistently, and like once I went to Baltimore, I would send her letters. I was making her art, sending her a bunch of art. And then I was talking to my grandma Pat, who was the one that had cancer and who was dying, my mom's mom. I was talking to her on the phone. And yeah, so I really wasn't keeping in like super consistent contact with my own family. I would keep them updated, but basically it was just like, I'm still here in Baltimore, so there's nothing going on. But like, because I hadn't really engaged with my grandmas that same sort of way for a long time growing up, I was actually doing that far more when I was there. Also, it was nice to make my real dad's mom really appreciated my art. She loved it, and she would tell me about how nice it was to receive those types of things because she just never had, and I would take so much time to make these letters and make this art for her, and she would tell me about how much she loved those things, and we really got really close while I was in Baltimore. This was in 2015. 2014, and, going into 2015. And I don't even know when my grandma Pat passed away, to be honest, but I know that I was talking to her a lot in 2014, and I remember her even telling me, like, she's like, don't worry about trying to please your mom. Like, don't worry about your mom's opinions about things, and don't let her hold you back. Like, you deserve to explore yourself and to go try new things and, to find out who you really are. She was like, I'm on my deathbed now, and like, the only advice I could ever think to give was like that it's so much better to regret having done something and made a mistake and for it not to be the right thing than to regret not having done something. She's like, I mean, that's how I feel, and that's the advice that I would give you in this position, which was profound and something I'm still struggling to fully embrace, to be honest. But like, even like her talking to me about like, she's like, I know you're trying to get away from your family, and I get it, and like, you don't have to constantly fight to get away from them either. Just validate to yourself that you don't need to make them happy. They should just be happy with whoever you are. Just be whoever you are, and it's okay to be whoever you are. And she like made a joke, well, it wasn't necessarily a joke, but one time she was like, you should go out to Oregon. My aunt had lived in Oregon for a time, and she's like, yeah, you should go out to Eugene. She's like, we went there, and I thought, this is the exact type of place that me, that I would like, because there were all of these hippie kids. How did she put it? She's like, all the kids there, like, none of them work, and they all have braided hair and do drugs. I'm like, I don't know what it is that you think of me at this time. Obviously, that's what you think. I'm just a hippie, right? I never really tried to hide that I smoked pot, to be honest. I mean, I did, but I didn't. And by the time I was 19, I was honest about it with my family. Like, at that point, it was largely part of my personality. I loved smoking pot. I smoked it every day, all day long, so I wasn't going to try to hide it. I also didn't really have an issue, like, like not going to church, or when I was going to church, like, I was still honest about, those types of things. I was honest about my sex life. I was honest about my drug use. It's not like I went around telling everybody every little detail, but I wasn't hiding anything at that time. I really was trying to embrace myself, but I was also like constantly caught up in these moral dilemmas of like, what should I do? Who should I be? Is this really okay? So it was nice to have those talks with my grandmas back when they were still alive, to be able to especially just in that period of time. They likely both saved my life, honestly. I think my grandma passing, actually, I was just thinking about it the other day, where I almost feel like she, her spirit, became a part of me after she passed in a really strong way. And she's just been guiding me this whole time. Which I know is wild, not because of the weird, I mean, I don't have a problem being that weird spiritually. It's wild because it's my mom's mom. And there's just this feeling of I can literally feel my grandma here. I mean, basically she had told me that when I was in Baltimore, more or less, but even now it's this feeling of it's okay not to trust your mom. I get it. But I think maybe that was part of it too. I think my grandma probably struggled with my mom that way. I know her family, her siblings have. There was so much that came to light, even when I was in Baltimore. Because it was at that time that, because I had moved away from my family, right? And under these weird circumstances, and my mom was so, she did not want me to do that, but I did it anyways. Well, she started freaking out. She was having a really, really hard time. She already said she was, and she was. But, as soon as she found out that her mom was passing, she started losing her shit. And if you know my mom personally, you know that when she starts to lose her shit, it gets really impossible. She makes everything impossible. And, you're not allowed to be happy because she's not happy. And she will be, ranting and raving and saying stuff that doesn't even make sense. And you're just expected to put up with it because she is in such an emotional state. She gets, I mean, she's a tiny little person, so she's very small, so it's not scary, you don't, I mean, it's not like she could actually really hurt you even if she tried really that way, but it's scary because of her mental state. And I'm at an age now where I've been through enough with her where I wouldn't put anything past her. I don't think that she would physically try to fight me, because she tried to hit me one time when I was 16 and quickly realized that she had no effect physically that way. But I wouldn't put her past her to mismanage somebody's medications or put antifreeze in somebody's coffee or any type of crazy shit, because she just gets crazy. And like I said, she says stuff that's just absolutely insane. And I used to struggle with those same things, having grown up with her, and going to therapy myself and working out so many of these things. I realized that the further away from my family I got, the healthier I got mentally. The further away I've stayed from my mom, the healthier I've been mentally. And yeah, there's just this energy that she carries that's really chaotic. She hides it well, but she only can hide it for specific periods of time, right? And she'll only hide it for specific people in certain ways. So she can go to church for a couple hours a week and nobody would know the wiser. But if any of those church women were to spend a full day with her, they would start to see her differently. And if they were to spend a full week with her, she wouldn't be able to keep up those masks any longer. And so she kind of relies on the family to keep up those masks for her. And she's kind of always done that with her siblings. And I kind of recognized that when I was growing up, just because of the way that her and her siblings would fight. But at the same time, siblings always fight and stuff, right? It wasn't until I was an adult, and especially here in Baltimore, where I just started to see things differently. And also, I was in a really paranoid time, because I started to realize at that point, that I had been abused, and I was concerned as to what extent, and I, really didn't want to think about the things that I had been through. I didn't want to remember them, and I especially didn't want to remember them in that light, when my family had been everything to me. My brother was my best friend, and to realize, how much he had damaged me was really hard to process. I just didn't want to do it. But all of this was kind of cultivating, and when I was talking to my grandmas and stuff too, they started just sharing this other perspective with me, where I suddenly realized, like, and you know, we're talking about like a woman that's on her deathbed, and both of these women are like, you know, at this time, what, in their 70s, and you know, they're looking back on their lives, and they're looking on their lineage, and they're just seeing things a little bit differently. I mean, both of my grandmas had told me that they didn't blame me at all for wanting to separate from my mom. My mom's own mom told me that, and my real dad's mom had told me that just prior to me going to Baltimore. When I was spending time with her, I remember her being like, I don't... She told me she never trusted my parents, and then both of my parents moved into her house. And the same year my parents moved into her house, suddenly all of the inheritances and everything got changed, and my mom became the beneficiary to everything. It's so strange. All of that's like a whole other story. But yeah, the first 4 months were... I just kind of was like co-pilot, right? I was kind of coasting. I didn't know what I was doing. I was free for the first time, but I also wasn't, because I was now staying in this new situation, in this man's house with his parents, where he's basically the head of the household. And things went from, like I said, like us having like challenges and chores that we would do every day, to like, it turned into like me having these specific standards that I had to meet every day. And the thing was that, like, so we were smoking pot, right? And then once we started to like run out of money because we were trying to save what we had made selling everything, it was like, okay, well, we're not spending any more money on pot. And I was totally okay with that. But the pot was kind of this thing that kind of like he could use to control me. So he didn't necessarily want to get rid of it fully. And then he started like, he never got better from that acid. So like he started like, he was always kind of weird, but then he would like go through these things where like he started being like, okay, well, I'm not going to smoke, but you can smoke. And I was like, okay. So then I would smoke, and then he would like freak out and try to make me feel bad about it. So then I would quit smoking, and then he'd feel bad about that, you know, or like, you know, would feel some type of way about that. So then he'd be like, no, it's okay, we can start smoking again. And then he'd be like, no, I don't feel okay with it. And then there was one point, the first time that I like really, I mean, I started noticing that like, if I packed the bowl myself and smoked it to myself, I would feel normal and fine, the way that I always had when I was smoking. But if I didn't finish the bowl and then smoked it later on, or if he smoked with me, sometimes when he was smoking with me, like if he packed the bowl would trip me out. Like I would not feel like it was pot. It felt like it was like laced with something, and I would be like super suggestible and like not really being able to trust my own, like what I felt like I was like hallucinating, and I couldn't tell really what was real or not, and I would kind of be really out of it, and like I'd be in this like weird kind of, not depressed, but kind of like, yeah, like kind of like a depressed state, like just kind of like, and I remember not liking it, and like at that point, like I stopped smoking as much, and then he would like encourage it and be like, oh, why aren't you still doing this? I thought you liked this. I thought this was like a part of who you are. I remember just like having all these weird feelings, and then like at one point then he started to like harass me. So then we start fighting. I start like it's slowly building up, and now, like I said, this is a few months in, and now we're fighting, we're arguing about things, stupid things, who even knows what, just dumb shit. We're just in a disagreement about something on some fundamental level, and we're fighting about it. And he started harassing me about it. And his dad bless his heart, was like, maybe you guys are just spending too much time with each other, you know, you go out for hikes and stuff like that, but like you basically are always around each other at all times. Because he had also gotten me, Kevin had gotten both me and him matching tablets that I was using, and he taught me how to download movies off of it, but then he would only let me watch certain movies, and then he made me start watching specific movies. Things just got really weird. But his dad at one point was like, maybe you guys are spending too much time together, or maybe you just need like some separate space. So his dad had actually kind of converted this closet downstairs. We had cleaned out the entire basement for his parents. It was just something that we did so that I could stay there, essentially. It was kind of like, you know, I help you out and then you let me stay here. But his dad had converted this closet in the basement into like this little art area. It had a little chair, it had a little table, and then shelves. It was not terribly big. I mean, it was probably like, like maybe a 4x6 space, a 5x6 space, something like that. In short, maybe only like 8 feet, 7, probably like 6.5 feet tall at the most. It was pretty short, but it was just like this little closet, but he converted it into an art space, which was very, very kind of him. And so both Kevin and I would spend time back and forth in there, and we kind of had set it up to be a space where we could be separate and have our own space. And then it kind of, as we started fighting and having an issue with each other and stuff, it kind of turned into, like, I was spending more of my time in there making art, because I was making art for my grandma and stuff all the time, too. And so it kind of became, like, my little security space where Kevin had his bedroom. And so I would just spend a lot of time in this closet. I'd spend more time in the closet than I really would spend anywhere else. And aside from outside, I would try to ride my bike for 40 minutes a day. And when we still had a vehicle, we had gone back to Wisconsin at some point, and I brought my vehicle there because I had my car there at one point. And I would drive around, but he became convinced that I was going and sleeping with random men in the city, and that's why I was driving around. He was the only person I was with the entire time I was in Baltimore. No, that's a lie. I did sleep with somebody on my way out. Found somebody on Craigslist, I think. And that was kind of just, like, I felt like I needed a rebound to break myself away from him. Because the first time I had tried to leave, I went directly to my family's and then ended up right back there. So the second time that I left, I, met this dude, on my way out of Baltimore. That's beside the point. I wasn't going and sleeping with dudes in the city. But that's what he thought that I was. So then he stopped letting me drive out in the city. And, as I was, in this closet most of the time, we'd kind of switch on and off. He had gotten rid of everything in his bedroom so that there was just a yoga mat on the floor. And sometimes he would sleep in there, but normally he'd sleep on the couch. And when we were fighting, sometimes we would both sleep on the couch together. And his mom was okay with that because the way that the couch was like a giant L couch, so we weren't even touching while we were sleeping. Because, we weren't allowed to, be having sex or anything in the house, even though we did. But, for a while, I would spend most of my time in the closet, and then I would sleep either on the couch or in the bedroom. And if I was sleeping on the couch, he'd sleep in the bedroom. If I was sleeping in the bedroom, he'd sleep on the couch. Normally, I would sleep in the bedroom so that I had a closed space, so that I had a closed door. But at the same time, then I was sleeping on a hardwood floor with just a yoga mat. No pillows or anything. We didn't have nothing. So it was more comfortable sleeping on the couch, but at the same time it was more secure sleeping in the bedroom, right? And then, like, things just kept kind of breaking down. Now this girl, Mish, this girl, right, this white rabbit girl that he had fallen in love with, apparently she was a stripper, and that was something he hated and held against me. He was obsessed with this girl and wanted to spend all this time with this girl all the time, and she, like, never really spent her time with him. But he would try to spend time with her. But he would talk about her constantly. And he would, like, show me these pictures of her, and he, like, wanted me to do my hair like hers at one point, and, like, I think she got her septum pierced, and, like, he wanted me to get my septum pierced. I pierced here. Which was stupid. I didn't even realize I was putting a hole in my face. I didn't understand that a piercing was, like, a permanent hole you put in your face. It's healed a lot since then, but there's still a little hole right there. But, like, he wanted me to, like, dress like her and act like her, but at the same time, like, if I did naturally, like, if I did anything to, like, express myself naturally, he didn't like it. Like, it had to, like, resemble her. He didn't like me expressing myself naturally. And he started to not let me, like, I generally always wear black. I always have. As long as I've been able to dress myself, I've always worn mostly black. And none of my partners like that. I remember my ex seeing my closet, and he was like, the fuck is this? Because literally everything I owned was black, and I loved it. That's basically how my closet is now, too. But he stopped letting me wear black. He didn't want me wearing black. He said that it was satanic. And that it was, like, making me susceptible to witchcraft. And what it was doing was, like, blocking people off from me, including him, his energy. So he would only let me wear navy blue. He was like, if you want to wear something dark, you can wear navy blue. But I wasn't allowed to wear black. And generally, what I was always wearing was, it wasn't like this at first. It progressed to this, right? And, like, I was always doing his laundry, and, like, we would both share cooking, but generally I was doing the wifey chores, right? And so he kind of just took on that role where he was able to tell me what I could and couldn't wear, essentially. And so he had me always wearing, he first had me wearing his pants, but I didn't really fit into his pants because I'm a lot curvier. He was, like an inch, maybe even 2 inches shorter than me, and, like, more petite than I am. I'm a big girl, right? So I didn't really fit into his pants. So I had a pair of khaki pants, and he had me pretty much just wear those every day. And I think I had to go get another pair. Yeah, I think I went and got even another pair of khaki pants. But I pretty much had to wear khaki pants every day. I had to wear his belt and his t-shirts, and they were just plain pocket tees, you know, high collar pocket tees, and, like, crew neck or whatever. And I had to tuck them into my khakis. And he'd let me wear my boots every day. I've always done that. I've always worn boots every day. He let me wear my boots every day, but that was the rest of the outfit that I had to wear. And he didn't like me to wear makeup. I could pluck my eyebrows, or, like, you know, I could curl my eyelashes, but he didn't like me actually wearing makeup. And I had to grow my hair out, which I kind of have always kept my hair long. I don't know, I used to do a lot of different stuff with it, but mostly because I was insane. So I didn't necessarily have a problem growing my hair out naturally, but yeah, he didn't want me doing anything with my hair. He wanted me very, very natural, and, you know, to look very basic. And he would take me to Kohl's and show me the women in the Kohl's, like, the pictures that they have in the store, you know, like, above, like, where the jeans are, or, like, above where things are, or whatever, in the areas, and he'd be like, that's what I want you to look like. That's what I want you to aspire to. And they're, like, slender women with, like, button-down shirts tucked into their dress pants. And I was like, okay, that's not who I am, though. Like, if that's what you want, go find that. But I didn't have the balls to say that back then. I don't give a fuck now. But yeah, I had no self-esteem back then, so I just did whatever he told me to do. I had to walk behind him in public with my head down. I couldn't make eye contact with any strangers, especially not men. And if he caught me doing it, he'd berate me about it and not talk to me and, like, give me all these different chores and stuff for an extended period of time. I learned quickly just to not even try. But, like, he would get frustrated because, like, when I had my head down and would be walking behind him, it would also draw attention. And he got mad at me for that, where he was like, you're looking too, like, you have to look happy to submit to me, because men look at you in public and they see you submitting to me but not happy, and it looks like I'm abusing you. And I felt abused. But it wasn't supposed to look that way. So he was like, you have to be happy to submit to me, right? And it was like, okay. And, like, he started writing on the walls. Now, we were already kind of writing on the walls. There was art on the walls. But then he started writing, like, my directives on the walls, which is, like, be your own happiness. You know, there was one where he didn't like my anxious chatter, which is fair. And I used to really, really struggle with it. I've gotten much better about it. Now, generally, when I'm talking, it's because I'm saying something of value that I'm intending to say. But I used to kind of just talk to fill up space because I was nervous. And it wouldn't be anything worth listening to. He hated that. So I remember in really big letters it said, I would bite off my own tongue if it meant keeping silent. And there was other stuff, and then there was, like, stuff about, like, what a true partner is, that we're equals. But then there was, like, a list of, like, what that looks like as a woman and what that looks like as a man. Just different stuff like that. That I was expected essentially to incorporate into my being. That was why it was on the walls in the room that I was staying in. And then he started giving me this silent treatment for a time. I also, like, you know, there was, like, I think 8 days where I didn't talk at all. I didn't say a single word for 8 days. If you know me, you know that was a bit of a struggle. But I did it. I also, like, you know, was expected to, like, do certain physical activities in order to keep up. I mean, he got me looking great. Like, I was in the best shape of my life after being there. You know, but that was also, like, the first time that I wasn't given to drinking caffeine and eating fast food and different stuff like that too. Like I said, like, I learned so much about everything being there, and I'm so thankful for it. But I'm thankful I survived it. It was a definite psyop, and there was a lot about it that was really fucked up. So, like, with the pot thing, there was one point where we were just fighting a lot, and, like, I started sleeping in the closet downstairs, just sleeping in there, just staying in there all the time. I was in there all day, and then I would sleep in there at night, and it had a door, so I could close it and technically lock it. If he wanted to, he could break down the door easily, but he didn't, and largely in part, I think, because his dad had made that space for us, so he wasn't going to disrespect it that way. wasn't about me. But like, we had been engaging sexually to some degree. Like I explained in the first video, like, I was never fully comfortable with it. But at the same time, the way that I was back then, even after going to the 12-step program, I was still given, because of the abuse that I had become accustomed to, I was used to kind of supplementing my lack of self-esteem with being open sexually, being sexually performative. It was kind of a defense mechanism and almost like an anxious tick to be overtly sexual. And he hated that about me as well. And, you know, like, that was why I was a demon witch, because I was a succubus. And I remember getting to the point where I was like, it's not me, I'm not a succubus, I have a succubus, there's a difference. And he was teaching me how to overcome it, so I can't complain about that necessarily either. But during this time when things started to get really rough between us, the sex had also changed from him just generally not always wanting to engage, but then engaging with like a lot of enthusiasm when we would engage that way, to harassing me about it, constantly calling me a slut and a whore, then suggesting that I was sleeping with other people, and what a slut and a whore I was for that. Guys would look at me in public when I was walking behind him with my head down, and he swore that it was just because of my slut energy, and then being able to pick up on it. And so he stopped engaging with me at all sexually for like a month and a half at first. And during that whole time, he was berating me for being fat and for being a slut. It was also at that time that he realized that I was fat. I was in all right shape, and he had liked my body at first, but then he was talking, like, he was like showing me like those women at Kohl's, you know, and like it showed me women like that enough, kept pointing out these women that he wanted me to look like, and I was like, that's not what my figure looks like. I'm literally never gonna look like a super slender woman without a chest, without hips, without an ass. That's not what I'm built like. I'm not a petite, I don't have a petite body. And he thought that that was just because I was fat. And I explained to him that it wasn't because I am fat, it's because I have fat. That literally my big old titties and my big old ass and big hips, that those are fat on my body. That's the way my body is built. That's part of my womanly shape, right? That's literally the way my body is shaped. When he found out that, like, my breasts themselves, like, they're very big, and he was like, when he realized that that was because of fatty tissue, he became disgusted with me because he realized that I was mostly fat. Didn't even matter how fit I got, I still had all this fat on my body, and it really grossed him out, and he would constantly complain about it and constantly just had a lot of shit to say about it. And during this time, like I said, like, he's not touching me, he's not being with me physically at all, and he's calling me a slut. And then over a period of time, though, then, you know, after a few weeks of that, like I said, like about a month and a half, then he wanted to engage with me sexually again, because he had gone so long without it, and because there's a woman constantly in his presence. But he didn't like me anymore at all, and, like, wasn't happy with the fact that I actually enjoyed sex. So then, like, he started becoming very demanding that, like, that we engage sexually and that I don't engage. Like, I could only stand there or sit there or lay there. And if I responded at all with any sense of pleasure, he would get really frustrated and he would stop and he would become very berating and degrading, and I'd have to deal with that for like a week. So I kind of just started making these allowances, and even that wasn't good enough, because even when I wasn't trying to respond, my body was still responding to the intimacy, and he didn't like that. That really bothered him. he didn't want me to enjoy it. And at that point, he cut me off completely, and that's when he didn't talk to me for a period of time, and then when he started trying to talk to me, I went 8 days without talking, without saying a single word, even to his family. And at that point, he got really frustrated about it, because it was when I wouldn't say a word, even around his family, that his mom and dad were like, she doesn't seem the same anymore, like, what's wrong? There's something going on here. And he didn't know how to explain it or what the issue was or anything like that. And so then he was like, you're bringing negative attention to this. Like, I don't want to have to explain anything to my parents. Don't make me have to explain anything to my parents, right? And like, I kind of like pushed the limit with him a bit that way by not talking for those 8 days. And that was mostly just to show him that I could and that he wasn't going to control me. And then, like, immediately I was happy and everything was all happy again. Once the pressure got too much where his dad started to, like, ask questions and stuff like that. Because then Kevin started to get really berating about it. So, then I came back around and was acting like everything was fine. And then we started, like, again, like, kind of doing things like we had when I first moved in. Where now we're, like, watching these movies together. But really what was going on was that he was forcing me to watch the X-Men series and the Matrix series and to take notes on it because he wanted me to come up with a theory of everything based on the movies. Honestly, I'm thankful that he had me do this. It has helped me exponentially in my life, but in such a weird way. And it was a weird order, it was something that I had to do in order to please him, in order to appease the relationship. We still hadn't even, it was like 6 to 8 months in before I was even allowed to work. I think it was like 6 months before I was even allowed to work. And then the only time I was allowed to leave the house was to go to work. And I had managed a dog daycare that was like 3 minutes away from the house, 4 minutes away from the house. And I'd already managed a dog daycare before. That's how I got into management right away. And they loved me at work. They thought I did a great job. They really appreciated me. They appreciated the work that I did. And I loved being at work. And I was generally happy. But it was almost like I had like completely separated those things. They had no idea what was going on in my personal life. I was just very good at work. And then I'd go back home. And I pretty much had to do that because he wasn't working and we needed money. His parents had gotten to the point where they were like, okay, something weird is going on between you two. We don't like this energy, and you guys haven't been working this entire time. So then I started working, and that way we had a paycheck so that we were paying for like our own food and different stuff like that, and pretty much just to keep his parents happy. But he wasn't working, and he also was being really demanding of me, like, obviously, like, he knew my hours and he knew how long it would take for me to get to and from work, so there was no discrepancy for time between those. I had to go to work and then come immediately back, and it wasn't like I got to come home and like talk about my job or anything like that either. I had to keep those things completely separate, and it was around that time that like I said, like I'd already felt all these weird things with the smoking the pot, and so I'd kind of cut down on that a lot, for the most part. But once I started working, I kind of picked it up a little bit, where like I pretty much would only smoke. I would smoke like half a bowl maybe before bed, and not every night, but on occasion, if not somewhat regularly. I was making money now, so I could afford pot again, right? I worked there for like 4 months or so, 5 months, something like that, like 5 months, I think, almost 6 months, I guess. But it was when I was working, the first like month or two were okay as we were making money and trying to make everything seem like it was okay. But then it couldn't hold up that long, and it started to get weird again. And And I started to like have weird sleep. We had gone back to, like, I had been sleeping in the closet now for, for like a couple months when things started to get really bad. That's when his parents were like, okay, what's going on here? And so then I slowly started to sleep back. We were back and forth between the bedroom and the living room, and then it slowly was that we were both sleeping again on the couch. We weren't constantly being separated. And things started to get weird. I just started to have like weird sleep. And I don't know, I was still just working. I guess I wasn't really necessarily thinking anything of it. There was just so much constantly going on. But there was a couple nights within the course of like 2 months where I'd felt like I had woken up in the middle of the night and been still like kind of half asleep, like in a dream, and it felt like I couldn't tell if it was a dream or not, and I couldn't tell if I was awake or not, so I couldn't really say what was happening, or like I couldn't really process what was happening, and I didn't fully remember when I woke up. I remember like waking up and feeling just like drowsy and weird. I was just like, and I thought it was just, I'm pretty sensitive to my dreams. So like if I don't often have nightmares, but sometimes I do, and when I do, they're like weird, and they get to me emotionally. They kind of stick with me, and they'll kind of just like mess up my energy. So it kind of felt like that a little bit. But then there was one night in specific. Now, and during this time, like, we're pretending that everything's okay between us. Things are still weird because he's on this kick of he's building a perpetual motion machine, and he's like drawing all of these like Da Vinci styled, I mean, he has like notebooks filled with all this like Da Vinci type stuff, like all these like numbers and images, and he's trying to create a type of machine, and it's for perpetual motion. He wants to create a perpetual motion engine, and he's having me develop the technology, and he's using me to do it. And so he like now like all of the things that he's having me do, he's basically using me as a tool, and he's telling me this, like this is what he's trying to do, and basically he's trying to harness my energy in order to figure out how to do this. And he has these concepts that if he can get me to essentially manifest these concepts in my own self, then it will prove his concepts for this machine, and all he has to do then is kind of figure out the math of it. Essentially what this looks like is, and I could get into this more, but essentially what this looks like is like him trying to teach me how to be a superhero. He's trying to teach me how to see through walls, and how to levitate, and how to read people's minds, and how to like tell the future, and how to move stuff with my thoughts. And he's doing this like I said, so he has me like watch the X-Men series and the Matrix series, and that's like a big part of it. And I have to like take notes on these things and then implement what I'm learning from those, and then he's taking from what I'm implementing, and then having me do these specific types of training, like sitting in a room with my eyes closed and being able to tell him what I see, how many fingers he's holding up, like those different types of things. Different stuff like that. He's taking me out to the park and having me like stand on things a certain way, or like move a certain way in order to try to see if I can levitate. Just weird science, just a weird science, stuff like that. And so he's just on it, and like we're pretending that everything's fine, but I'm mostly entirely checked out when I'm at home at this point. I look forward to work every day, and I'm so happy when I'm at work and I'm doing a really good job, and these people have no idea what's going on with me. And I like it that way because it makes it feel like there's like an escape. But they start to catch on that there is something not right, and they don't know exactly what it is. And I haven't said anything to them about anything. And I didn't know that they were feeling any type of way. I didn't know so around this time, apparently my bosses, it was a family-owned business, so it was my bosses that were a husband and a wife, their 2 daughters that worked for us, and then they hired me and another girl, and a boy, and all of us worked together, and I was the floor manager. And so we were all very close, and apparently, like, behind my back, technically, they were talking about me, but not in a negative way. They were talking out of concern, like, has anybody heard anything about what's going on in your life? Like, there just is something that doesn't seem right. I didn't know that they were having these talks. So like I say, then there's one night where I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like feeling all groggy, dreary, like I'm feeling like I'm in this weird dream state, and I realize that Kevin is having sex with me. And I kind of like get this like startling feeling. And I remember being like, this can't be real. And then I passed back out. And I like kind of completely forgot about it. But then like a week later, the same thing happens. And this time when I wake up, like, he's eating me out and then starts having sex with me. And I realize that like I'm not just dreaming. It's actually happening. And then I realize that I've felt this way multiple times now. I just hadn't fully come to yet. And that he's been doing this. This isn't the first time he's been doing this. And then I got this sick feeling with like a flashback of when I was a teenager. Feeling like I had experienced that same feeling as a teenager. Living in my parents' basement. When my brother lived there. But I can't say if it was my brother or my stepdad or both. Or neither. That isn't me feeling that way. I just remember these flashbacks and not wanting to remember them, and they made me sick to my stomach. And I remember just being like half asleep, half awake, and like watching him between my legs and then get on top of me. And he's still calling me a fat slut and a witch. And like, I started to feel some type of way. At that point, I really started to feel some type of way. That I just couldn't hide anymore, and I couldn't keep putting up with anymore. And like, me and my one coworker had gotten pretty close. So like, we're just talking one day, and she like starts talking about like she had recently gotten into a relationship, and she was asking for relationship advice. She's younger than me. And I'm her supervisor, but we're all very close. It's a little family business, right? So she asked me some relationship advice, and she was like, I really appreciates it. And then I was like, can I ask you some relationship advice? I remember feeling so silly, but I didn't know how else to bring it up, and I really wanted somebody else to know what was happening. Because I just felt like scared and lost, and like things just kept progressing and getting worse, and I really didn't know what to do or how to get out of it or how to even handle it. And I kind of like was vague, but I kind of just like, I brought up multiple things. I brought up multiple issues that I had had with Kevin over the course of time. And like, when she realized that these were things that had happened, that were happening progressively over a course of time, like, I remember her face looking concerned and her being like, I don't know, like, she's real sweet, and she like, I remember her being like, well, I don't think that that's right, and I don't think that you should put up with that, and like, maybe you should look for somewhere else to go. And I remember just kind of like being passive about it, but mostly because I was being deflective, and mostly because I realized like maybe I'd said too much, and I got nervous. I didn't want any of it getting out because I didn't want it getting back to Kevin. I didn't even know how he would find out, but I just remember feeling really nervous about it, and so kind of just trying to like brush it off like it was nothing, right? Which she let me do. She was very smart about it, and she was very kind about it. But apparently then that day she went and told the bosses, you know, her concerns when it came to those things. And it pretty much validated their concerns. And so the next day I come into work and like, you know, like it's nothing. And they tell me that they want to have not like an emergency meeting, but like an impromptu meeting. They want to have a meeting with me at the end of the workday. And I remember being like kind of nervous. I thought I was in trouble. I didn't know what I'd done. I thought that I was doing a really good job. I had no idea what it could be about. And I texted Kevin at one point to let him know, and he didn't believe me. He thought that I was like, there must be some guy that I'm trying to see. He didn't believe that there was a meeting at work. And I was like, I mean, if you want to come here, you know, before I'm supposed to get off, so that you can see that I don't leave the building, you're free to, if you want to wait the whole time for the meeting, in order for the meeting to be over. But they said that it's going to be right after I'm done with work, so this is what time the meeting is supposed to start, and I'm assuming it's going to be this long. And that's what he did. He showed up there before I was supposed to leave to make sure that I was still there. And he actually even came in to see, and they were like, yeah, she's here, but we're going to have a meeting actually right afterwards. It'll probably only take like 40 minutes to an hour or something, whatever, half an hour, however long it took. That was the first time they'd ever met him. That was the first time they'd ever seen him. He's like, okay. So then he goes back out, and he decides that he's just going to wait in the car for me. And I think he even he came in, you know, at the same time that like I would have been leaving before the meeting started. It was something like that, because I remember him being like, you know, like, hurry up, make it quick, whatever sort of deal. Like, he was already not happy about it, and he already was very suspicious about it, like, just didn't like. And I think I didn't realize at the time anything. Like, I think he was nervous that he thought that I had been telling them things. His control just kicked in. And I just remember being like, at this point now I'm nervous and I'm scared, because I already know, like, I don't know what this meeting is for. I don't know if I'm getting in trouble at work for whoever knows what. But I know that no matter what, like, he's going to be mad at me just for the fact that I had this meeting, that the schedule's changed, and that, you know, I'm not home, you know, at the time I always have been. Even though he can obviously see that I'm there at work, and they told him, like, yeah, we're going to have a meeting or whatever. I knew he wasn't going to be happy. So all of the dogs go home, and, you know, we put everybody else in their cages or whatever. Everything, close up shop. I don't think we had even fully finished. I think the bosses were like, hey, let's just have this meeting really quick or whatever, so that you can get out of here. And they're like, we just want to talk to you about some things. I was so nervous because I thought I was in trouble. Then they were like, well, we just met him. He's definitely not exactly what we expected. They're like, he doesn't, and then I was like, oh. I was like, did you expect him to be, like, they were like, well, they're like, he acted basically like we expected, but he's smaller than we expected. We thought he was like some big, rough dude when we found out that he was ex-military. But he's actually just some little guy. Because my boss was like a bigger dude. And, you know, I kind of laugh about it. And they're like, listen, we really love and care about you. We look at you like family. We look at you like one of our daughters. You've done a really good job for us. We're so thankful to have you here. We've been talking and trying to consider if there would be a way that we could renovate down here some of the space that we normally keep the dogs in, so that maybe we could make a little space that you could live in, and you could just live here, and just work for us, and that way you wouldn't have to be where you're at. They're like, I know that these things are supposed to be private and that we're not supposed to know, but we've heard some concerns about your life at home, and we're equally concerned for you, and we're not trying to embarrass you, and we're sorry that we went about it this way and that we know things that you don't want us to know, but we're really, really concerned for you, and we just really care for you, and we don't want you to be in an unsafe position. So if you would consider, we'll do whatever we can and invest whatever we can in order to build up a space so that you could live here. Because they didn't have space at their house, but that way I could be right there at work. And they were like, or to be honest, like, and then my boss's wife, like, they're both the owners, they're both my bosses, but the wife was like, she's like, I just don't want to see you on the news, and I get really bad vibes about the situation that you're in. And my other boss was like, yeah, me too. And they were like, we really don't think that you're safe. We think that your life may be in danger, and we don't want to hear on the news that, you don't come into work one day and then we find out that it's because something horrible happened. And they're like, seeing the way that he was with you, even just for having this meeting and not getting home right away after work, like, just raises our suspicions or validates them. And as much as we would like to make a space here for you and to be able to do those things, it would take time, and we're not really sure that there is time. It really seems like you're not in a safe situation, and we really think that maybe it'd be best for you just to go back to Wisconsin. And I remember being like, what a weird, hard thing to hear. Like, go back to Wisconsin. But they were like, we just don't think that you're safe here. And he wouldn't follow you back there. Like, he wouldn't, we just don't think that you're safe here. I remember being like, they're like, we'll give you a good recommendation when you get there, for work. Anything that you need, I think they even offered to, like, front my paycheck early, or to, like, give me extra money to ensure that I could get out of there. And I was like, no, I have my money. It's not about the money. I've just not felt like I could leave. They were like, if you don't want to leave, we will make a way for you to stay here, so that you can go back there tonight and get your stuff, and you can come right here even tonight. Like, you don't have to stay there. We don't feel like you're safe. And that was weird. And so basically I was like, okay. And I realized, like, yeah, that if I didn't, Kevin had already at that point told me, like, he kept calling me, like a dumb fat slut. And, like, he was like, he told me at one point, like, as he was doing all of these things, and, like, I pretty much had just given myself over to him, and he was like, if you're not, like, if you're not smart enough to figure out how to get out of here, like, you are going to end up dying here. Like, you're either going to kill yourself or I'm going to end up killing you. Like, you're an idiot for being here, putting up with all of this. And that's almost part of, like, he's like, into, like, if you can't wisen up and know how to tell me off or how to get out of here, like, it's just going to get worse. I'm just going to continue to get worse. He had even told me that. And it was heading in that direction, but, like, I already kind of didn't care about myself, and had had this death wish forever, and it just didn't seem like it mattered. Honestly, when my bosses told me how much they cared about me, they felt like the only people that cared about me at the time. And I just didn't want to disappoint them. by potentially getting murdered or killing myself. So it's like, okay, like, do this for yourself. But really, I did it for them. But I did leave, and Kevin wasn't expecting it. I don't think I even took that much with me the first time. I think I just took what I thought would be sufficient, whatever I needed, and I was willing to leave everything else behind. I'd already pretty much sold all my things to begin with the first time, right? Even before I went there. So I didn't really need much, but my dog, I had my car at that time, so I did. I kind of just like fled. He was not expecting me to leave. His family wasn't expecting me to leave. His mom woke up, and I think by the time I hadn't come home that day, like, she started asking him, like, where's she? Where'd she go? And he was like, didn't have any answers. And then I remember him calling me. I'd already been driving like 8 hours. And he called me. He's like, where are you? And at that point I was in like close to Pennsylvania or some shit. I don't remember, but I was like either already out of the state or close to being out of the state, or already like half a state away or some shit. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that I packed my car that night and then left the next morning as if I was going to work, and then just drove. I was driving back to Wisconsin. Only I took Maggie with me. I think that's the thing that set him off. But then he must have assumed that maybe I took her to work and just was like, something's up. But then like the second I didn't come home from work, he was like, he probably drove to my work and saw that my car wasn't there. Then was like, okay, what is it? Like, there's a problem. I don't remember. I just remember him calling me, and he was in tears. He literally started crying. I was like, you can't leave me. I can't be without you. And I remember, like, I started crying. But I was like, no. Like, I don't think I even finished the conversation. I think I hung up on him halfway through the conversation and then just started driving again. And I think I only drove for a few more hours and then took a nap. Because I was just weeping. I was so confused. I think at that point I called my family. I remember calling my mom and telling her that I was coming back. She was so excited. She's like, okay, when do you think you'll be here? And I wasn't going to be there until late at night. And she was like, okay, well, we'll see you. And I remember just feeling icky about all of it. I didn't want to go back to my parents' house. I wasn't ready to go back to my family. I hadn't even had the capacity to be able to even process the things I had started to process when I first moved out to Baltimore. So as soon as I started driving back from Baltimore, all of that got triggered right away, and I suddenly realized, oh yeah, I don't feel safe in Wisconsin either. I don't feel safe with my family. I'm not okay there. What safety am I running to? Am I really running from something worse than that? I felt really confused. And so I got back to Wisconsin at like 10 o'clock at night. And my mom had left the door unlocked. It was like 10 or 11. My mom had left the door unlocked. So I came in, and they were already asleep. And they had this giant Bible open on the coffee table. And I remember coming in with a bag and sitting down. And I started reading this giant Bible because it was already open. It was like one of those really old, classic, Catholic-looking ones. I don't think the Catholics even read Bibles, but it was something like that, you know, with all the pictures and everything. And I started reading it, and immediately, I don't even remember what it was open to or what I was reading, but I remember getting this really distinct feeling that I wasn't going to be better off at my parents' at this time, and feeling this really strong pull to just go right back to Baltimore. And so that's what I did. I literally stayed at my parents' house for maybe 3 hours and then turned right around and drove back to Baltimore. So then my parents wake up, at like 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever time, and I'm not there. And then when I don't show up for a minute, they give me a call and they're like, "Where are you?" And I was like, "I'm going back to Baltimore. I couldn't be there. Can't handle it." And they were like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "I'm going back to Baltimore." I was so lost and so confused. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who I could rely on. I didn't know who I could trust. I was so scared, and I didn't know who I was anymore. So I get back to Baltimore, and I call Kevin, and I let him know that I drove all the way back. He's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah." So he let me back into the house, and there's just this wicked vibe. I did not feel good at all. At all. I remember his family being quiet, They didn't really know what to think. Obviously, there was something wrong with me, but they didn't know what. And then it started to sink in, like, man, what would my work think if they knew that I'd come back here after successfully leaving and getting all the way back to Wisconsin? I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't feel safe in my parents' house, but I didn't feel safe in Baltimore either. I remember really feeling like I just needed a hug from somebody I could trust, which has been a common feeling in my life. That's why I still get emotional about it. But I didn't have access to that. I remember Kevin giving me a hug, and it felt just awful, really. I mean, he was trying so hard to make it feel some type of way, but I just felt lost. I felt really lost. And then I was there for another, 2 weeks, and it was awful. It was so much worse. We immediately started fighting. To the point where it was getting, physical. I'd push him away from me. He'd get all up in my face, start, pushing me, poking me, following me around and poking me. We were yelling, which we hadn't done prior. Even when we were fighting, we weren't, yelling. We were arguing, but not yelling. So I was, keeping myself in the closet. Again, I just stayed in the closet that whole time. And then, there was one day in particular where, we were yelling, screaming. And I remember at one point, I had gone down into the closet, and he had brought a knife down with him and was, poking it through. The door had, not shingles, what are those, slots, right, of wood, wooden slots. And he was, jamming the knife through there. And he was, calling me a bitch and shit, and just, that's how it originally started, actually. When we first started fighting, we were in the car. We had gone in his car down the block so that his parents couldn't hear us arguing. We were yelling and fighting, but in the car. And at one point, he, pulled my hair. He grabbed my hair and pulled my hair. And he, when he did it, he, pulled my face, close to his. And he was, looking at me. And I literally bit him. I grabbed his cheek. I bit onto his cheek because he was holding my hair like this and his face was right here, and I literally just bit his cheek. I'll get fucking savage. I'll bite your entire fucking nose off your face. I don't give a shit. Don't fuck with me. But I never been in that situation necessarily prior. I didn't even know what I was doing. It just came out of me. That's why I don't like fighting, because I don't know what the fuck's gonna come out of me. I will literally eat you alive. If I have to. And then he slapped my face away, called me a bitch. And I remember just being like, this just isn't good. This isn't gonna end okay. This isn't gonna end well. And I think at that point too, he said like, you're such a dumb bitch. Like, you came all the way back here for this. Like, I think both of us were like, this isn't gonna end well. And that he was like, you're gonna die here. He was not happy with the fact that I bit his face. I forgot about that, honestly, until just now. So things are fucked up. And, like, then there's this point where, like, yes, and then he's, like, stabbing this knife through these slats, calling me a bitch, writing on notes, stupid shit, and, like, putting it through the slots, because the door was locked, right? He wasn't gonna break the door. And at one point I was like, okay, motherfucker, I'm about to fight you. And he heard me, like, push the chair as I got up and go to unlock the door, so he, like, rushed upstairs. So I followed him upstairs. And his dad was outside, I think, at the time. And then, like, I was, like, arguing with him, fighting with him. And we started yelling. And first I raised my voice and I started yelling at him. And then he pressed his face against mine. And, like, instead of yelling, like, he literally just pressed his face against mine and was, like, shit-talking me, like, yelling at me, but, like, in my face. And I remember him, like, spitting on my face while his face was pressed up against mine. And his dad came in and was like, okay, that's enough of this. If you guys don't stop this, I'm gonna kick you both out. And then left again. And I remember, and he went downstairs. And I remember Kevin being like, you better not get me kicked out of my parents' fucking house. And I was like, dumb piece of shit. Why? Because you're 26 and can't take care of yourself? Can't get a fucking job, can't do anything for yourself. I've been doing your fucking laundry. Your mom has to feed you and clean up after you. Like, and I just started shit-talking him about it, and he wasn't happy about that. And I started to raise my voice again as I was shit-talking him because he was getting mad. No, I didn't raise my voice yet. I remember shit-talking him and him making this stupid face. And me being like, God, I want to fucking punch this dude in the face so bad. And he saw it in my face. And so then he, like, said something smart. I don't even know what he said. I had checked out. And at that point, and I went to go punch him in the face, which is the first time I've ever hit anybody. The only time I've ever hit anybody. I don't think I've ever punched anybody in the face otherwise. I think I tried to hit my ex after the fact, after this. Once. Maybe. I don't know if I even tried that. But I tried to punch him in the face, this dude. And I immediately, as soon as I started to swing, realized that it was a dumb decision. And it kind of had pillow paws. Like, when I hit his face, it was just so soft and limp and, like, nothing. And I remember, like, hitting him in the jaw and him just smirking. His face barely moved, and he just kind of smirked at me. And at that point, I was like, fuck. And he just immediately grabbed me by my hair and just dragged me out of the fucking house. He was like, you fucking witch. He dragged me across the street, actually, into the grass, and threw me into the grass across the street. And called me a black witch. Told me I was mentally ill. And told me I needed to get the fuck out of his house. I was like, okay, bet. And he's like, I'll help you. So then he went back into the house, and I followed him back into the house, and he wasn't happy about that. He immediately started grabbing my things, and I immediately started grabbing my things, and I didn't even care. I was just, like, grabbing my shit and throwing it in my car. So that's what he was doing too. Like, we weren't packing things nicely into my car at all. We were literally just throwing shit into my car. And he like didn't care if anything got broke or anything like that. And I remember kind of breaking down about it, and his dad being like, "What's going on? You guys are making all this commotion and stuff." He's like, you can't do this anymore." And he's like, "It's fine. She's leaving. You're not gonna have to deal with this anymore." And I think his mom even came home. I think she had been at the store and the market or something, and she came home while this was happening, and she's like, "What's going on? Why is everything? Why are you packing your car? She's leaving again?" He's like, "Yeah, she's leaving again for good." She's like, "I'm so sorry." Like, at that point, like, his dad ended up giving me a guitar that he had built. His dad built guitars, and he gave me a guitar that he had built. His mom, like, was hugging me and telling me that she loved me. And, like, while we were, like, trying to calm down, Kevin was out in my car with a bag of sand. I don't know where he got this sand, but he had sand, and he was putting it all over my car. He put it on the hood of my car, on the back trunk of my car, on the top of my car, on the inside of the seats. He put these symbols, he put the chaos symbol all over everything in sand, and then poured sand into my vents in my car. And I remember saying goodbye to his parents, and then grabbing my dog, and Kevin was like, "Let me say goodbye to Maggie," and I was like, "You don't get to say goodbye to Maggie." He was mad, because he was trying to be nice to her, and she jumped up into my arms and just got into my car with me. And I left again. I didn't go back. He called me as I was driving and started apologizing again. I was like, "We're not doing this again. Not coming back. I'll die in Wisconsin if I'm gonna die in. Not doing this with you." But I took my time getting back to Wisconsin too, because I didn't know what I was doing. I remember, like, once I even got there, like, kind of hanging around Kenosha, driving around Kenosha for a while. I think I saw a few friends, just acting like I was back in town. I really didn't know what I was doing. Definitely didn't want to be at my parents'. And I think I ended up only being at my parents' for, like, maybe, like, a month before I ended up moving out. It was 2 months, 3 months, almost 4 months. Because once I did get back to their house, I fell into a catatonic state for like 5 weeks. It was an extended period of time, where the only thing I would do was get up and eat. I don't even know what I was eating at the time. Probably leftovers, whatever leftovers there were. I wasn't cooking anything. I wasn't preparing anything. I wasn't doing anything. I was wearing the same giant t-shirt with nothing else. Like, just the same shirt every single day. I was barely showering except maybe once a week, every couple of weeks. I was just sitting on the edge of this futon at my parents' house, just like staring off into the distance, so in my head, just wondering what my life had become. I didn't know who I was. And apparently at this time, my mom was convinced that I had been on heroin this whole time and told the family that I was withdrawing from heroin. That's why I was so fucked up mentally. She swears she never said that, but multiple family members suggested otherwise. My mom isn't known for being terribly honest, so it's not like I'd put it past her to say any of that. And she definitely was treating me Like, there's something wrong with me. You know, she wasn't trying to be there for me. I think she didn't know how to be there for me. I don't know. I remember my brother trying to, like, pal around with me and me being able to, like, pretend I was okay in short spurts, but then, like, being really fucked up. And I remember getting mad at him because all of a sudden it came, like, I started going through this mental process of being like, why the fuck did I let all this happen? Why is this who I've become? How did I let this happen? Why did I let this happen? And all of a sudden it started to come to me that so much of that abusive behavior I'd been groomed into accepting. That all of these red flags I should have seen, I didn't recognize because those were the same flags that had been waved in front of my face my entire life. I didn't know that those were things that were potentially dangerous. I didn't understand the danger that I was in. I didn't recognize the abuse for what it was because I had been making excuses for abuse my whole life. And I remember at first becoming really angry at my brother for that. Especially because when I realized that I was getting drugged and raped, I didn't know how to process that, but it made me mad at my brother. I just didn't know how to process any of it. I was mad at my whole family. Mostly at my stepdad and my brother. And I wasn't even talking to my stepdad at all. So he was getting mad at me at this time. You know, because I was being disrespectful. And I'd get really emotional with my mom. And she really didn't know what to do about it. She was trying to be comforting. But, I don't know, I was just really fucked up. And, like, after a while, she was like, let's go get our nails done. We'd never done that. But she was like, maybe that'll help you feel. You know, I wasn't taking care of myself. And she's like, maybe that'll help you. It'll, like, jumpstart you taking care of yourself because you can feel good about yourself. Which is very kind of her. And it did somehow help. I went and got my nails done, and it was the first time I'd ever gotten my nails done. So, I had gone and got my nails painted with my grandma before. And I got my nails painted professionally for my brother's wedding. But me and my mom went and she told me that I could get fake nails. Which I'd never gotten before. And so I got the almond-shaped stiletto ones. Got stilettos, I think. They were pointy. Whichever ones they were. I think they might have been almond, but they were pointy. And I liked that. My mom was like, those are wild. Well, those are wild, but if that's what you want. She let me get them, and I remember that feeling really weird, but good. She never really let me embrace myself those ways. She always wanted me to, you know, like the things that she liked, and, you know, I kind of knew that was something that she wouldn't like, but that I liked, and she let me get them. That was very nice. And it did something for me. It really, I started cleaning myself and taking better care of myself, and then I started to go out. And it didn't take long once I started to go out before people were interested in me. I looked totally different than I had ever looked before. I look like I look now, but I never looked like this before. I'd always been chubby and I'd always carried myself differently. I just, I think I looked depressed. I think I didn't have like this sparkle. Some people would see it in me, but most people wouldn't. And like I said, like guys never gave me positive attention really. But I started taking care of myself. People started realizing that I had like a nice body. And as I started to go out, I started to do open mics when I was singing. And that was something I'd been practicing the whole time I was in Baltimore, was music. So I was actually like pretty good at this point. And something had broken in me, so I suddenly was able just to be confident in a way I never had been before. I think I never used to look at people in the eye and different stuff like that either. Or when I did, I might have looked like scared. I don't know. I was just different. And I definitely noticed because people that had known me for years didn't recognize me. My own family didn't recognize me. Dudes that 2 years before I had been interested in and they didn't give me the time of day suddenly found me very attractive and wanted to, get with me. So something had changed. I was doing these open mics, and then I remember meeting this, my friend Pat introduced me to his friend. He said, "Hey, I have a single friend who's a doctor. Can I introduce you to?" And I was like, Every other woman in the world would have been like, a doctor? So he's got money? I assumed that's what he was trying to get at. Like, hey, I got this rich guy. I got this rich friend that you may like. He's single. I remember just being like, nah. Nina's like, he has a doctorate. He's a professor in astrophysics. And I was like, oh, yes, introduce me to this man. Let me meet the astrophysicist, the astronaut. So he introduces us, and dude is a giant Zach Galifianakis in a pair of khakis. And I'm like immediately enamored. And we didn't date terribly long. We dated for a couple months. And this is while I was still staying at my parents'. He ended up not really caring for me. The more he got to know me, the more he realized that I was out of my fucking mind. And that maybe we weren't well suited at the time because I was still coming out of Christianity and was still caught up in a lot of Christian delusion. And he was a hardcore atheist. He was literally a professor of science, of which I understood very little. And I loved that about our relationship because he was constantly teaching me so many things, but I think he hated that because it was just we weren't equally matched. And he had always been in love with this other girl who had never given him any attention, but once we started dating, then suddenly she started giving him attention, and he dropped me like a hot fucking potato to get with her, and they're still together. Bless them. She was actually a friend of mine because she had been dating a different friend of mine. That's how I met her, and I thought she was my friend. When she started dating the dude, like the dude literally dumped me and then immediately started dating her. And so I had written her as a friend on Facebook at one point and was like, hey, like just want you to know I was literally just dating this dude. Like last week he was in my butthole. She thought I was just trying to get into their relationship and get her, that I was just trying to get back with him and get her not to be with him. So I was like, okay, well, then I guess we don't need to be friends because obviously we weren't ever really friends. You don't trust me for shit. And I wouldn't want you thinking I'm trying to break up your relationship with the guy I was just falling in love with. So, because I really wasn't. It was quite obvious he had been in love with this girl for some time. If a man that I'm interested in isn't interested in me, I might still try to vie for his attention, that's true, but if he's genuinely interested in somebody else, I'm not going to try to compete or compare with that. That's not the type of person I am or have ever been. That's literally why I separated from my husband. Somebody I was planning on spending the rest of my life with and had every reason to, because we were legally bound to each other. We had wedding rings and everything, like, and even that I let go because he was in love with somebody else. So I'm not going to sit here and fight you for a man who doesn't even want me. But I digress. The point of that relationship, we weren't together long, but the point of the relationship was that he really helped me out of a lot of the delusion that I'd fallen into and that I was still trying to break free from. As short-lived of a relationship as it was, it changed my life for the better, fundamentally. I think I probably would have started spiraling and cycling out of control again had I not gotten into that relationship. Had I had gotten with anybody else, I don't think it would have ended well. But instead, he kind of put me on a new path, a new course in life, to take all of the insane shit that I had just been through and to make something good of it. So that's what I started to do. And that's what I've been doing this whole time. There's a lot of different details I kind of skipped. And obviously, I mean, I was in Baltimore for a year. For 11 months. Essentially, it really was like this psychological operation that this man was running on me that I had completely conceded to. Because I hated myself and was lost and didn't know what else to do with my life, so I kind of just let him take control. There was a lot that went on. Well, like I kept trying to say, like when we were like with the pot smoking and stuff too, like yeah, I thought that he was drugging me. At one point he literally, like, prior to me waking up and knowing for sure that I was getting assaulted while sleeping, but after the point that I started to feel really weird sometimes when I would smoke and thought that maybe he was drugging me, and I was like, is that something you can even do? Like, can you lace pot? I didn't know that was even a thing. Despite having been on coke for those several months, I was pretty limited in my scope of drug use. It's pretty much all through my brothers that I learned anything at all. I mean, I grew up with, like, my brother's wife now, like, having been on heroin and people around me and ODing on heroin and different stuff like that, but I wasn't fully integrated into those things and didn't really understand a lot of it. I didn't know what he could have possibly been drugging me with. And at that point, like, I don't know. I didn't really know what was going on at any point in time, but I remember one time him, he was acting crazy. And so I went down, and maybe we did have the closet. I don't know why I went. There was a bathroom downstairs too, and I went and locked myself in the bathroom. And I think maybe because he would still bother me in the closet, but in the bathroom I thought that he would think that I was using the bathroom. I remember locking myself in the bathroom, but I don't think that the door locked. I think I just shut myself in there. I don't remember if the door locked or not, but I remember being in the bathroom trying to hide from him, and him coming downstairs and banging on the door, knocking on the door and begging me to open it. Please open the door. Please open the door. And he was like freaking out and he was scaring me. He was like tripping out. He was having like a weird panic attack, but like a psychotic episode. I was scared of him, so I had went to hide in the bathroom. He came down and he was knocking on the door. Please let me in. Please let me in. And so I opened the door. And I remember him falling onto his knees and he was bawling and he looked at me real crazy. His face was really crazy. His eyes were real big and he was like this. And he looked really, but he had like tears streaming down his face. He looked insane and it was scaring me. He scared me a lot, but this was a particular time. And he was like on his hands and knees and he like put his head in my lap. He was crying on my lap and he was like, I got rid of all of the pot. And I was like, what do you mean you got rid of all the pot? We had literally just bought an eighth. We had just bought an eighth like 2 days prior. I did with my money. And he's like, I got rid of all of the pot. And I was like, what do you mean you got rid of it? And he said, I ate it. I was like, you ate it? And he said, I ate all of it. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, I had to eat all of the pot in order to get rid of it. He said, but I had to get rid of it because there were demons in it. There were demons in the pot and I couldn't let you smoke it. And he was tripping the fuck out. And I remember looking at him and listening to him say this, that there were demons in the pot and that he was trying to protect me from the demons that were in the pot, and that's why he decided to eat it, and he felt really, really guilty, and that's why he ate it. And I remember just looking at him and I was like, if there were demons in the pot, why did you eat it instead of flushing it? And his eyes got real big and he suddenly realized, like, I didn't have to eat the demons. Like, I could have just flushed them. I could have thrown them away. But now I ate them and now they're inside me. Like, he was tripping out. And at that point I was like, and I remember just like being so scared and just being like, it's okay. It's okay. Just whatever I could say to get him to leave me the fuck alone. Because I was terrified. And then I was trying to like, either I was trying to get up or I was trying to get him to get up, to get out of the bathroom. And he was like, don't go out there, there's a demon out there. And I literally remember like, and I don't think I'd even smoked this pot. I think he was just tripping me out at this point. Because I remember looking into the basement and for a second, like, okay, well it was probably like 20 seconds. I literally saw this like giant, this like 10-foot massive troll-like beastly demon thing. It looked like Ludo from the Labyrinth, only without fur. He had just like muscles, but he kind of looked like Ludo, but he was like giant, like even bigger than Ludo. Really, really big. Really super bulky and muscular, but he had like those same horns and stuff. And he was like so big that he was like hunched over in the basement, and he like had his head like this, and he had white glowing eyes. And I remember that like he was like breathing and his shoulders were pressed up against the ceiling, and like as he breathed, like I could like see the whole room like shift with his breathing. And I remember it startling the fuck out of me and then being like, fuck all of this. I was like, he's not doing this to me. And it just felt like he was like trying to trip me out. I felt like he was trying to trip me out. It felt like he was like trying to cast some spell on me or something. It felt really, really weird. I didn't know what it was, but I was tripping out myself at this point. Like, seeing that really threw me for a loop. And I remember just like pushing him essentially off of my lap and then like going upstairs. Like, I kind of rushed past him, and I literally had to like rush past this giant demon thing. Didn't move or anything like that. And then like I went up the stairs, and I remember like as I was going up the stairs, I had that feeling where it was like, this isn't even real. But it had felt so real. And like at that point I was like just feeling really weird about things. There was a lot that went on in that house that was insane. Like I said, I mean, he literally had me to the point where he's like teaching me how to see through walls and read people's minds and shit. Which, granted, I'm not saying that some of it didn't work to some degree. I do actually have some sort of belief in those types of things. maybe it's because I was forced to watch the X-Men series the way that I was, and because I was being drugged and shit. But I really do have this concept that, like, that was his concept. That was Kevin's concept. He had me watch Deadpool in the X-Men series as part of the X-Men because he believed himself to be like an Ajax character. And Ajax in the X-Men is the one that turns Deadpool into an X-Men, essentially. And how he does that is because he learns that, like, X-Men are essentially just mutated human beings. They're human beings that have a very specific gene that, if triggered properly, mutates them into a superhero. And what it takes to trigger that specific DNA code sequencing, essentially, is a very specific type of trauma. And it's different for each DNA sequence. You know, for the boy that could create fire when he was angry and, like, shoot fire when he was angry, it was a mix between... No, it was just him getting mad. But it was him getting mad that triggered that. Like, every X-Men has a specific trigger that induces their specific superpower. And it's not always anger, it's not always, you know, but it's always something specific that triggers it. And they have to, like, learn how to harness that in order to use this superpower properly. And that was his whole concept of these things, where he was like, we're going to figure out what your superpower is, and I'm going to exploit you for it. Just the same way that Ajax did with Deadpool. And it was like, cool, okay. And it did get to the point where, like, I mean, I could see through walls. That was trippy as fuck. I could sit in his living room and see outside. I could see through into the kitchen, you know, and it wasn't just a guessing thing, but I can't fully explain what was going on because it doesn't make any sense physically. However, that did lead to the PTSD that I carried for years, where, like, I had never had such a strong PTSD. But then there was one time in 2016, so this is like a year later, a year after the fact, where I was sitting in over a year, little over a year, where I was sitting in my living room in Elkhorn, and I don't know if I mentioned this in the last video or if I mentioned it in a reading, but I was sitting in my living room in Elkhorn, and my ex and I, at the time, we were dating, and I'm pretty sure that we were arguing and that it triggered my PTSD. There was something that had triggered my PTSD, but I remember sitting in this living room, and suddenly I was not in my living room in Elkhorn any longer. I was in the living room in Baltimore, and I could see everything. I could see it, I could smell it, I could feel it. We had totally different couches, and I could feel the feeling of the couch in Baltimore in my hands. I could literally, like, and it was like, even when I turned my head, and I remember it being really trippy because it wasn't just like a mirage where things kind of looked like that. Like, it was straight up like I was back in Baltimore, and I literally stood up and was like looking around, and I walked to one side and to the other of the room, and it was the room in Baltimore, and I remember it tripping me out. And I think I started crying, and I called for my boyfriend at the time, and he came in, and I told him, like, I'm not here right now. Like, I'm literally looking in the apartment, and I heard him come in, but I couldn't even see him. And I just remember, like, telling him, like, I'm literally back in Baltimore right now. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I'm having a flashback, and it's tripping me out. And he was like, okay. It was really fucking weird. It took me quite some time to come back from all that shit. And my battery's about to die, and my memory's about to be up, but I'm gonna have to get back into this again, because there's so much that I still haven't even touched on. Hopefully this is at least entertaining. I don't know who needs to hear this or why I need to get this shit out. I guess it's just helpful for me, but yeah, because I'm just trying to move on from this shit. I don't even know, but I'll have more to add to it at some point. Thanks for listening. Weird, wild, I don't know. All right.